Hello. Thank you for joining me. I'm Mbaya, and I've spent a good few weeks debating whether or not to buy Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I've decided to make a brief video on the subject just in case anyone else is out there thinking of diving in and wondering if it's worth it. Now, CSGO has been out for well over 2 years, and of course, Counter-Strike Source and the original Counter-Strike predates the current iteration by a substantial amount as well. People have been playing, enjoying and getting better at Counter-Strike for around 15 years, I believe. So, if you've never played or played a long time ago, it can be a bit intimidating to consider jumping in now. For me, I had previously played around 7 or 8 years ago with Counter-Strike Source and had forgot absolutely everything about the game, so much so it felt like I was starting fresh with the series. My reactions aren't what they used to be anymore, and it's been a long time since I really enjoyed a competitive first-person shooter, so I wondered if CSGO was the right place to be looking. I've bounced off quite a few multiplayer FPS games recently and heard some concerning stories about other people's experiences with CSGO, but finally decided to give it a go, and have not only been pleasantly surprised, but have thoroughly enjoyed my time with the game as well. If you're on the fence about getting started, I absolutely recommend you give it a shot. There's a fair bit to learn and you won't be competing with the pros anytime soon, but that doesn't mean you can't have some great games. The big turn off for me was the community. I had heard the CSGO community is very unwelcoming and hostile, and yeah, there are some bad apples about, but in my experience, not really that different from other games. In fact, communication during rounds has been high, and there is often some good spirit being shown as people say GH or good half at midway points, and good game when a match concludes. The next issue faced is that of hackers and or cheats. In my 30 or so hours since I've returned, which I realise is a tiny amount compared to veterans of the game, I've not witnessed any blatant or disruptive hacking going on. I've had a few games where one person was incredibly good and seemingly dominated the game, but not to a point where I thought something fishy was going on. And speaking of someone dominating games, we should talk about Smurfing. As I'm led to believe, Smurfing is when someone of considerable skill and experience has a new account that is usually unranked or ranked very low in order to get some easy wins and decimate their enemies. It's a thing people do, and I think I've been on the receiving end and with a teammate or two that was doing such a thing. However, it hasn't ruined my experience with the game. It can be a bit demoralising, especially in a competitive match where you know it'll likely go on for the next 40 minutes or so, but I'm also of the mindset that you can get better by playing against those more skilled than yourself. So you can certainly take advantage of the opportunity to see how they play and learn a few things you might not have been aware of. Fortunately, CSGO does have a ranking system, where after 10 wins you'll hopefully be matched with opponents around your skill level. Earning those 10 wins can be a challenge, especially for solo players like myself, but they'll come in time. To hopefully help you get those first wins under your belt, I thought I'd go over a few tips that I've learned during my first week back in the game. Bear in mind there is a lot to learn about CSGO, such as team tactics, map layouts, good positioning, grenade use, recoil control and more, which will come in time. These are just some basics for getting started and will hopefully reduce the rate at which people shout at you for doing something a bit daft. First off, there are a lot of weapons available, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, control patterns and usefulness. Don't be overwhelmed and instead stick to a certain few weapons. As the counter-terrorists, your starting pistol and backup weapon will be the USP-S. This will take some getting used to as it's not the hardest hitter, but it's always useful. If you fancy a bit more punch, I'd recommend the 5.7, as it's a solid weapon with a decent clip size and perfect for those rounds where money is an issue. The go-to weapon for the counter-terrorists is the M4A1S, which is the silenced variant of the M4A1, which I find to be a bit more accurate. This is a great weapon for any engagement, and with a bit of practice you'll be taking out enemies near and far. For the terrorists, you'll default to the Glock 18. Not the greatest, but it'll save your life on more than one occasion with a bit of luck. Next up is the Tech 9, a hard-hitting pistol with a large clip size that in the right hands can be a little beast. The terrorist's all-rounder, however, is the infamous AK-47, which personally I find a bit trickier to use than the M4A1S and requires tighter trigger control, but needless to say, it gets the job done more often than not. Both sides have a collection of useful grenades at their disposal that are highly tactical and can make or break a round. However, there are a couple of things to consider. You and your team are not immune to your grenade's effects. If you misthrow that smoke grenade, you could severely limit your team's view of the area, and there are few things worse than getting flashbanged by a teammate. Also, unlike a lot of other games, explosive grenades aren't as lethal as you'd expect. They can be used to soften or finish off a target behind cover, but don't expect a cheap way of taking out a cluster of enemies. So, you've got your weapons, but before you even fire off a shot, consider delving into the options and tweaking the mouse sensitivity. I've always been accustomed to having high sensitivity, but when I started playing CSGO, I was finding I wasn't even getting my crosshair over enemies half the time. I reduced the sensitivity by half, which is around the 3 to 4 point area, and the difference is night and day. Out of all the tips I've learned so far, this has seen the biggest improvement to how I play the game. It might take a bit of getting used to, especially if you favour wrist movements over hand movements for your mouse control, but it's something I well recommend experimenting with. I mentioned the crosshair, and this is another change worth considering. The default expanding crosshair I found pretty good to get used to how weapon accuracy changes with movement, so if you're just starting out, have a play with that at first. Once you're comfortable with the way it works, however, I'd switch over to a static, classic crosshair. It might not seem like a big change, but I certainly saw improvements to my game. Movement plays a huge role in CSGO, especially when firing your weapon. Running around will reduce your accuracy by a huge amount, and while walking increases your accuracy, getting used to brief pauses in movement to fire your weapon will see stronger results. Don't expect to be sidestepping and tapping off a round or two when you first start. Instead, plant your feet and focus on your enemy. Crouching can be a useful tool, but in my experience is more useful in extremely close encounters or extreme ranges, or simply making the most of a nearby obstacle to block line of sight. As you'd expect, running around makes a lot of noise. If you're just starting out, you might overlook just how valuable footsteps can be. While noise generated from footsteps doesn't travel too far, it can be heard through walls and can easily be used to determine the direction of incoming enemies. Avoid making too much noise by walking instead, especially during engagements and trouble spots on a map. You may have seen more professional CSGO players unloading an entire clip while retaining their accuracy as they control their recoil, but as a new player, firing your weapon without pause, which is otherwise known as spraying, will severely affect your accuracy. Weapons in CSGO start off incredibly accurate, so get used to firing off a round or two in bursts rather than holding down the trigger. This is true even at mid-ranges. For many, habitual reloading after firing a shot or two can be second nature by now, but remember, a single bullet can be deadly, especially in CSGO where health isn't regenerated. If you run out of ammo during a firefight, switch to your pistol. It's much faster than reloading and might just save your life. As a terrorist, someone on your team will have the bomb, or will have picked up the bomb during play. Be very aware if this is you. It's never good to have a bomb site locked down only to not plant the bomb. It's even worse when you're the one sat twiddling your thumb holding the thing. If you have an opportunity to plant, do so. Not only does it generate money for your team, it can also put your team in a favourable position of defence. Going around a corner is one of the deadliest moments in CSGO. You never know if an enemy is waiting for you to peek around, having already lined up a perfect headshot. While practice and familiarity with a level will aid you in coping with corners, always try to anticipate where the enemy will be and be quick on the trigger. I've not mastered corners myself. Sometimes it seems wise to walk around focused on what's in front of you, other times people catch me off guard by darting through and pausing for a shot. One thing I don't recommend you do is to crouch crawl around one. It might seem logical, but more often than not you'll simply give yourself away by poking your gun barrel or a leg past a wall and die before you can get a bead on your target. Always keep an eye on your minimap. it's a valuable tool. While it can be used to give away enemy positions when they start firing away, I find it much more useful to keep tabs on teammates. Being a man down can open your team up to getting flanked. Handily, the minimap will inform you of where your teammate just went down, allowing you to change tactics and adapt to a new potential threat. When you first start, you may hear people saying stuff like long A to inform you of enemy movement, seemingly shorthand gibberish for those more experienced with the game. However, if you glance above the minimap as you run around a map, you'll notice it will name specific areas that you enter. It will take a bit of experience getting used to the exact locations, but as they say, knowledge is power. If you're taken out, a simple report via text or voice chat such as 2 at long A can give your team the information they need to succeed. Communicating with your teammates is hugely important in CSGO, whether it's a simple go B to get people on the same page at the start of a round, or reporting on enemy numbers and locations mid-game. Any additional information really can make a difference. Always stick to the plan. As the counter-terrorists, you're on defense. At first, you'll need to spread out your team to cover the bomb sites. If you all go to the same area, chances are the enemy will sneak behind your backs and get a clear run at the other site. Also, there is no need to rush. Engage the enemy on your terms, and if possible, let them come to you. You'll likely have to leave your point to assist your teammates once the bomb carrier or assault force has been identified, but until then, don't push your luck. As the terrorists, stick together. Having someone run off to point A while the rest of the team goes to point B is often a waste of manpower, and you really don't want to be the guy running around aimlessly while the bomb is being defused halfway across the map. Once the bomb is placed, think about locking down the bomb site. You're now on the defensive. Don't take unnecessary risks. To some, Deathmatch just isn't Counter-Strike. However, do give it a go. Not only have I been having great fun in this mode, it's a good place to get more familiar with weapons, getting into the zone for a competitive game, or just relaxing after a tough match. That's about it. There is so much more to CSGO than these starting pointers, but if you're a new player, I hope this information helps you out. Thank you very much for your time. Take care.